Before you begin, this story is a journey into darkness, where fear is not just a reaction, but a part of you, lurking, waiting to consume you. Escape is an illusion. The voices, the figures, are not mere imagination. Once you step in, there's no turning back. The nightmare has already begun. There is no waking up. The Seattle rain hit the lab windows like static, soft but persistent. A rhythmic hiss that bled into the soundscape Mara Greene was analyzing. It was past midnight. She was alone, by choice. The others had gone home hours ago, leaving her with the prototype audio interface echo, an gnawing sense of unease she refused to acknowledge. The lab's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the hum of the servers pulsed through the floor. She adjusted her headphones, clicked record, and ran the new test file, white noise, layered with infra-frequency sampling. The system was designed to capture sound beneath the audible range, to hear what humans couldn't. It was revolutionary. But something was wrong tonight. She leaned in, brows furrowed. Beneath the static, something moved. Scratch, drag, whisper. A voice, almost imperceptible, breathy, slow, coiling around her name like a snake tightening its grip. Mara. Her fingers twitched. She froze, ears straining. She rewound, played it again. Same result. A whisper, not synthesized, not digital. Organic, male, disembodied. She yanked off the headphones. The lab was silent except for the ever-present rain. Her heart punched against her ribs. Just RF interference, she whispered to herself. Maybe crosstalk, or a data echo. But the hairs on her arms were standing straight. She restarted the recording. The waveform visualizer glitched, then reshaped. As the audio played again, she saw something forming in the lower end of the spectrogram. Spikes, patterns, almost like speech. Then came the whisper again, clearer this time, more urgent. Don't ignore me. A sharp, unnatural click echoed from the far speaker. Mara bolted upright. Nothing. No one. She opened the raw file logs. A new entry blinked at her. Secondary source detected. No input device. She hadn't added another input. Her breath hitched. The waveform was still moving, as if something was recording her now. Then the lab lights dimmed, flickered, and went black for exactly 3 seconds. When they returned, her monitor displayed a new screen, one she hadn't opened. A face, not human, blurred, almost fetal in shape, eyes hollowed into black sockets, as if pressed against glass on the other side of existence. The display crackled, and her headphones emitted a low-frequency growl that made her teeth ache. She stepped back, knocking over her coffee. It soaked her notes, ink bleeding like veins. Then came the voice again, guttural and low from the speakers this time. Now you've heard me. I can hear you. The lab door clicked shut with mechanical precision. Locked. Mara stumbled back, breath caught in her throat. Then she heard it. Something moving, inside the walls. A slow, deliberate scraping. Flesh dragging across wires. Or maybe something far older, far deeper. And in that moment, she realized the sound she was studying was studying her back. Mara didn't sleep. She left the lab just before dawn, her hands trembling, heart still pounding to the rhythm of that voice. Every time she blinked, she saw that face, blurred, eyeless, aware. She told herself she was overworked, that sleep deprivation and long exposure to audio loops could explain everything. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her home. Her apartment was quiet, too quiet. Not the usual urban hum. It was a sterile kind of silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums like deep water. She set her phone to record ambient noise out of habit. 30 minutes later, it stopped recording on its own. When she played it back, she expected the hum of her fridge, maybe some hallway chatter. Instead, she heard herself breathing. Only, she hadn't been in the room. At work, she didn't mention it. Her team would think she was paranoid, or worse, fragile. That was a death sentence in a male-dominated tech company. She stared at the waveform files like they were puzzles to solve. Maybe they were. Later that night, the lab was empty again. Mara pulled up the same recording from the night before, this time slowing it down, filtering it through 4 layers of frequency isolation. At first, just white noise. Then, they're not listening. But you are. She froze. It wasn't a recording. It was responding. She checked the file properties. Timestamp. Live. But there was no mic input. No device. Her software wasn't playing the file. Something else was. Suddenly her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. You shouldn't have heard it. She dropped the phone. Her breath came in shallow gasps now. Then the overhead speakers popped. Once, like a gunshot. Silence. Then static. Then, screaming. Not hers. Not human. It was the kind of scream that bypasses language and hits something primal. Something reptilian. Like a warning from another species entirely. She scrambled to unplug the console, but it wouldn't shut off. The screen lit up again, the same face, now clearer. The eyes were still black, but its mouth had split open wider, inhumanly wide and moving. Mara watched the waveform spike and dip in sync with its lips. She turned down the volume, but the voice was still there, inside her ears, inside her head. She ran to the restroom, locked herself inside. Her ears were bleeding. She held tissues against them, shaking. Her reflection in the mirror seemed off. Not wrong exactly, but delayed. Like it hesitated a second too long before copying her movements. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Your ears aren't bleeding. It's just opening them. She couldn't breathe. She smashed the phone against the sink. From behind the mirror came a whisper, not from inside the room, but within the glass itself. Let me out. The light above her flickered. For a moment, her reflection smiled. She didn't. Back at her desk, the file had changed. New title, Live Feed Mara, .1.0. And beneath it, a text log. Heard, 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 heard. Then one final entry. Now listening back. Mara hadn't spoken aloud in 3 days. She couldn't. Every time she did, she heard it whisper back, not through her ears, but from inside her skull, like thoughts that weren't hers wearing her own voice. The voice was male, low and slow. Not cruel. Worse, it was curious. She stopped answering calls. She stopped going to meetings. She slept on the lab floor under her desk with the lights on. But the lights began to flicker in patterns, dots and dashes. Morse code. She translated it once. It spelled, "You are not alone." The audio files continued recording on their own. She deleted them. They returned. Always longer, always deeper. The waveforms started to show patterns she couldn't explain. Not speech, not even sound. Shapes, symbols, spirals, eyes, hands with too many fingers. When she zoomed in far enough, she swore she could see veins, capillaries, tissue, as if the sound had grown organic, She visited a neurologist, told him she was hearing phantom voices. He smiled too much. "You're probably dealing with auditory hallucinations, common with prolonged isolation and sensory exposure," he said, scribbling something down. She asked him if he ever heard things no one else could. He paused too long, then said, "Not anymore." That night, back in the lab, she sealed the doors, duct taped the cracks, put black fabric over the windows. She disconnected from the internet, shut down all Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no signals, silence, real silence. Then she opened a live session on the interface. No mics, no inputs. She stared at the empty waveform, daring it to move. It did. First a pulse, then a second. Then, her voice. "It's quiet now. I think I'm alone." She hadn't said that. Not recently. That was from 2 nights ago. Something she mumbled to herself. But the timing was off. The cadence was wrong. It sounded like her voice, yes. But behind it, something else. A wetness, like the voice was being forced through lungs filled with liquid. The voice continued. "You're never alone in the mono." She typed the words into a search engine. Nothing. She tried spectrogram imaging of the last recording. This time, the shape formed clearly. A spiral with branching paths like neurons, like synapses. Was it a brain or a map? And in the center, a word, not written, but felt. Home. That night, she couldn't hear the rain. Not because it had stopped, but because something else had replaced it. A low, continuous hum. Not unpleasant, almost soothing, like the womb, or the void between stations on an old analog radio. She realized her ears had started tuning to it, like it had always been there, like it had just been waiting for her to stop listening to everything else. At 3:13 a.m., her bathroom mirror shattered from the inside, and from her laptop speakers came a single whisper, clear as breath on skin. "Thank you for making room." Mara hadn't heard her own voice in days. Every time she tried to speak, the words came back distorted, delayed, reversed, sometimes rearranged entirely. She would say, "I'm fine," and hear "fine, we're inside," whispered milliseconds later, sometimes from the speakers, sometimes from her reflection, sometimes from nowhere. She stopped speaking altogether. Her co-workers began to notice her silence. Someone left a sticky note on her monitor. "You okay?" She didn't answer. But later, when she opened her laptop, a new audio file waited. "Okay, U.wave." It was just breathing. Then, on the 47th second, "No, she's not." Her headphones were unplugged. The system had no input. She checked the metadata. Created by, null modified, live owner, Mara, listener. She stared at her screen for 10 full minutes, paralyzed. The lab lights flickered again, exactly 4 times. She counted them. The same way she used to count her heartbeat when she was a kid having night terrors. She remembered her therapist telling her, "If you can name what you're afraid of, it loses power." She tried. She whispered, "I'm afraid it's real." And something answered, "Good. That means we're close." She vomited in the sink. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Her ears felt swollen from the inside, as if something were building pressure behind the drum. She grabbed a pair of scissors. She wanted to cut the sound out, literally. Wanted silence back like a limb lost in war. Instead, she locked herself in the soundproof booth, that tiny padded chamber where they tested impulse response data, the room where sound died. She stayed inside for hours, eyes closed, breathing steady. Then she heard the knock. From inside the wall, a single tap, then another, then rhythm, a pattern, 3 short, 3 long, 3 short again. SOS. Her own fingers began tapping back before she realized she was moving. She couldn't stop, like muscle memory for something she'd never learned. And then, her mouth moved, slowly, softly. She whispered, "We hear you." Except she didn't say it. Not really. Her lips moved, yes, but the voice was not hers. It was too low, too wet, like lungs filled with oil. She opened her eyes. The walls of the booth were vibrating, just slightly, like a muscle twitch. The padding bulged in and out like it was breathing with her, or through her. Then, in the foam, she saw it, a human ear, not attached to anything, just embedded. Skin pressed flat into the padding, cartilage and canal, listening, and beneath it, another mouth, smiling. She stumbled out of the booth, gasping. Her nose bled freely now, thick and dark. She wiped it away with a trembling hand and noticed her fingertips were turning pale, almost translucent. She tried to call 911. The numbers on the screen scrambled, not random, just repeating. 1-1-1-1-1-1. Feedback shrieked from every device in the lab at once. Speakers, intercoms, her phone, the emergency exit alarms, and buried beneath the screech, layered in the sonic chaos, she heard her own voice. The body resists, but the channel is open. She dropped to the floor, sobbing. Above her, the lights didn't just flicker. They dimmed, pulled inward, like the room itself was exhaling light. Then silence again. Total silence. And in that silence, a soft sound, like fingers brushing skin. Tap, tap, tap. Mara stopped dreaming. Not because she wasn't sleeping, she was. In short, choked bursts. But because when she did drift off, she heard the voice more clearly. No longer a whisper, not background noise. It was speaking to her in full, coherent sentences. Patient, calm, like a therapist, or a priest, or something that had waited for ages to be heard. The world is too loud. You were chosen because you know how to listen. Every night, the voice spoke a little longer. It never begged. It never threatened. It simply explained. Noise drowns truth, but frequency is pure. You've been surrounded by false signals all your life. That's why you ache. That's why nothing ever felt real. She tried to resist, tried white noise, music, screaming. But no matter what she did, it always came back, quieter, closer. And sometimes it would laugh. One morning, Mara found her phone's microphone on, recording. She hadn't opened the app. The file was labeled Listening Session, 06.wave. Duration, 8 hours, 43 minutes, 17 seconds. She didn't remember any of it. She hit play. It was mostly silence, then breathing. Hers, she assumed. Until, at 3:02:14, a second breath. Not hers, wet, raspy. So close to the mic it almost sounded inside it. Then the voice. Do you know what you sound like from the outside? Mara slammed the laptop shut, heart racing. She went to a sound specialist, one who worked with victims of trauma and sonic hallucinations. She didn't tell him much, just enough to get a hearing test. She expected static, ringing, something physical. What she didn't expect was the look on his face when he finished. Pale, cold, jaw tight. He said, "Mara, there's something unusual with your inner resonance." She asked what that meant. He hesitated, then spoke slowly. "Your auditory canal is reflecting signals, as if it's broadcasting, not just receiving." She laughed, an ugly, desperate sound. "Are you saying I'm a transmitter?" He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it. That night, her ears began to bleed. She covered them with gauze, but the blood soaked through. Not red, black, like ink. She stumbled to the mirror, peeled back the gauze, and found something else inside her ears now. Not just blood, not just flesh. Tiny wires, coiled, delicate, growing, like roots. She ripped them out, screamed as the pain lit up her skull. But behind the agony, she heard something else. Laughter, but not malicious, proud, like a parent watching their child finally hear. The next morning, she awoke to find all of her devices turned on, not just powered, but playing the same audio file in sync. Her own voice slowed down and layered with the low hum. The listener has awakened. Her phone screen glitched once, then showed a message in perfect clarity. Reception is clear. The message begins now. Mara unplugged everything. Router, laptop, phone, TV. She yanked cords from walls until her apartment was silent, not quiet, dead. She wrapped her head in towels, stuffed her ears with wax, sat in her bathtub with no lights, no movement, and still the voice came. Not through air, not through devices, through bone. Flesh is merely the antenna. The signal was always meant to spread. She didn't know when she started repeating it. Not aloud, at least not at first, but in her mind, like a song stuck in her head that she couldn't turn off. Flesh is the antenna. Signal must spread. Flesh is the antenna. Signal must spread. Over and over, until it became hers. She didn't notice how long she stood at her window that night, watching the city, hearing everything. The neighbors arguing through thin walls, the buzz of streetlights, the quiet, horrible pulse of electricity flowing beneath the pavement. She began to hum, low, vibrating, like feedback wrapped in breath. And somewhere down the hall, a dog started barking, then howling. The next day at work, 2 interns complained of migraines. Another started vomiting when she got near Mara's desk. No one could figure it out, except Mara. She felt it. The transmission was no longer inbound. It was radiating from her, pushing through walls, through eyes and teeth and skulls. She avoided everyone, but that didn't help. Her phone still lit up with voice memos she never recorded. Random people began reaching out, people she hadn't spoken to in years. A college friend sent a voicemail. "Hey, weird question. Do you remember that recording we did in undergrad? The silent one? I played it again, and there's this sound now, underneath, like whispering, in your voice." Mara didn't reply. Instead, she checked her own old audio files, recordings from years ago. They changed. On every one, beneath the original sound, a new signal pulsed. A voice, her voice. Transmission stable. They are listening. You are listening. She ran to the subway, desperate to disappear in the noise. But the moment the train entered the tunnel, every passenger's phone buzzed at once. A mass notification. Airdrop request received from Mara. She hadn't sent anything. She didn't even have her phone. The file name, truth001.wav. She watched as people around her opened it. Their faces changed, blank. Some stared at her. One man smiled. "Thank you," he whispered. "We hear you." Back home, Mara screamed into the mirror until her voice cracked. But it wasn't her reflection anymore. The Mara behind the glass moved after she did, mimicking, late. Then, it spoke, while her mouth stayed still. "You're doing well. Soon, they all will hear." Her reflection placed a hand on the glass, and her real hand lifted to meet it, without her command. Later that night, She found a note on her front door. Typed, clean, no signature, tuning complete. Begin phase 2. Spoken infection ready. The walls began humming, not vibrating, humming. Low at first, like the deep rumble of a storm still an hour away, but it grew, not louder, fuller, like a voice being joined by others, one by one, in perfect, inhuman harmony. Mara's sleep became impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw mouths, dozens, open, silent, waiting. They didn't scream, they sang. A droning chorus, no words, just tones, frequencies so low they shook the bones behind her eyes. She woke up bleeding from her nose. Every night, she tried recording the sound, desperate to prove it. But when she hit play, it wasn't there. Only static. Until minute 3:33. That's when the audio changed. She heard her voice whisper, "They only sing when you close your eyes." Mara smashed the recorder, smashed her mirrors, tore down the drywall. But behind it was more wall. And behind that, more hum. No escape. So she left. Walked the streets for hours. Her ears rang. People passed her, but some turned. Watched her too long. One woman mouthed something at her. Mara stopped. "What did you say?" The woman smiled and whispered, "We've been harmonizing with you." That night, Mara's voice cracked in the shower, literally. A sound escaped her throat that wasn't human. It vibrated so violently, it shattered a bottle of shampoo near her feet. She fell, gasping, but even her breathing made the walls tremble. She tried to scream, but the sound came back to her in layers. Her own voice multiplied. An echo, but faster, louder, not delay. Response. She rushed to her bedroom and found the radio on. It shouldn't have even been plugged in. Was playing a low rhythmic chant, over and over. "We are here. We are here. We are he." The power cut. Darkness. Silence. Then, from behind her, not through speakers, behind her skin, joined the choir. The air thickened. Mara fell to her knees, clutching her ears. But it didn't stop the sound. The voices were inside her now, not voices, tones, chords, too many to count. She looked at her reflection, what was left of it in a shard of mirror on the floor, and saw them, mouths inside her own, opening, singing. The reflection opened wider and wider until it was just black, and from that black, one final tone, sharp, piercing, so high it cut through her skull like glass. She blacked out, woke up on the floor, nose bleeding, mouth sore, fingers bent at wrong angles. On the wall, something had been scratched into the plaster with her fingernails. The song is almost complete. Mara no longer recognized silence because there was no such thing anymore. Even when the world went still, when lights cut out and clocks stopped ticking, something remained. A vibration in the marrow, a pulse in her skull. Not a sound, not exactly. Something older, something that had waited for her to listen. Now, she couldn't stop hearing. She stopped leaving the apartment days ago, if time even passed anymore. Her mirrors were gone, her phone melted in the sink, and the windows were blackened with soot and pages from books she didn't remember owning. Her body had changed. Veins pulsed visibly beneath her skin, in time with the tone. Her voice no longer obeyed her. When she tried to speak, sometimes her jaw would lock. Other times, a different voice came out. Male, female, dozens of tones layered into one. She had become a channel, a broadcaster of something not meant to be heard by the human mind. They visited her now, not as shadows, not as ghosts, a sound. The hum took form, figures made of static glitching with every breath, their heads tilted in unnatural ways, mouths permanently agape, releasing a constant droning harmony that warped the air. Sometimes they'd sit beside her on the floor. Sometimes they'd crawl across the ceiling and lean down, dripping with sound. Sometimes they spoke. You open the door with your ears. You're not sick. You're awakened. The static is a language. We are the voice of what waits between frequencies. She clawed at her ears one night, desperate to end it. But the sound came from inside, behind her thoughts, below consciousness. We tuned you. We bled through the bandwidth. Now you are the transmission. The building went quiet days later. Not a single person remained. Police tape appeared, then vanished. News reports whispered of auditory contamination, of entire apartment blocks going catatonic. But none of it made sense. None of it reached her, because Mara was no longer here. She had phased. Her body flickered now, like unstable footage. Sometimes she was in the hallway, sometimes on the floor, sometimes nowhere at all. And when people walked by the building at night, they'd hear it. A soft, eerie choir bleeding through the walls, and sometimes one voice clearer than the rest. You're listening. That's all we needed. One final night, Mara stood before her mirror, what little remained of it, and looked into the blackness that had long replaced her reflection. Inside it, she saw others, hundreds, all facing her, all singing, all her. And one by one, they tilted their heads and opened their mouths in perfect sync. The signal has replaced you. The final tone rang out, sharp, high, unbearable. Then nothing. True silence. And from that void, far away, a child's voice whispered, "Mom, I heard something. Can you play it again?" End. The rain still taps against the glass, just like it used to. Only now it doesn't sound like static. It sounds like breathing, like a million tiny whispers finding their way through the cracks, pressing against the very air. I used to think I was alone in this apartment, in this city. But now I hear the chorus. It hums from the walls, pulses from the pavement, vibrates in the marrow of every person I pass. They don't know it, not yet, but they're singing along. Every flicker of a screen, every silent phone call, every empty hum of electricity, it's all part of the song. I used to fight it, claw at my ears, scream until my voice broke. But how do you fight something that's already inside you? Something that is you. The signal isn't just out there anymore. It's in the quiet spaces, the unheard frequencies, waiting for someone to listen. And when they do, the song just gets louder. Are you listening? Really listening?